Good morning, everybody. When I was a teenager, my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle bought Clear Lake Lodge. So my dad was a civil servant with the Highways Department for over 40 years, and my mom raised two Rangi boys. My aunt was a teacher, and my uncle was a principal. So three civil servants, no entrepreneurs among them. And we used to go to Clear Lake every summer. That was a fun thing to do. So wouldn't it be great if we had a lodge? I don't know exactly where that connection came from, but I do remember it was 1979, interest rates were 18, 19, 20%, and we somehow borrowed about $130,000 to buy Clear Lake Lodge, a 22-room, which apparently turned into a family cabin at the lake, which when we had capacity, we would rent out for money. Now, I want to talk to you about the value of freedom today, because the plan somewhere in there was to get some freedom from Clear Lake Lodge. And freedom comes from three things: planning, information, and management. The plan for Clear Lake Lodge was to survive. There was no written plan, there was no business plan. The banks lent the money based on personal equity and job stability and ability to pay, not from the business, but from the jobs and the life. The information was, do we have a room available, yes or no, and will your credit card clear, yes or no? And that was in the days of swiping before instant, so, or would your check clear? So it was a very short-term cash flow, get people in the beds at night type of business. Management. Management was hands-on, rowing the boat. They were changing beds. They were doing all sorts of things. They were hiring staff when they could, but the focus was on cash flow. It was a 24/7 business. They originally started off with 2-week shifts over the summer months and found that was just grueling to be 168, 336 hours on all the time. So then they changed to 1-week shift, which wasn't bad for the teachers because they would go and decompress, but for my dad, he would go back to the highways and apparently decompress there. So it was always on. And part of the value of freedom is the purpose of your business is to be fuel for your life. You're not the fuel for your business. And that's a really important distinction. So that as you're growing your business, it needs to be giving you time, it needs to be giving you money, and it needs to be giving you some kind of emotional reward or legacy for what you're doing. And hopefully fun, and hopefully it's aligned with your skills and your passion. In your packages, on the top of the right-hand page is a little quiz. So I'd like you to pull that out. Okay, ready? So, question 3, who has a gap more than 5 weeks? Honest people, thank you, very good. Question 6, who has a gap of more than 5 weeks? Who doesn't want to say? Very good. So, you have a business, you have an extremely valuable asset. Compared to if you sold your business for an ideal 3 to 5 times EBITDA today and stuck the money in the bank, earning 2% risk-free, there's no way you would generate from that funds what you're getting in terms of salary and dividends and economic reward today. So the opportunity to retain your business and make it more valuable and more profitable and not be there is an ideal outcome, especially if you're under 60 or 70 and you still want to make a contribution. You don't need to be there all the time. You don't need to be there full time. And it's an arbitrary condition of 3 weeks vacation or 4 weeks vacation. When you say you want to take 8 or 12 weeks vacation and literally not be there 1 week out of each month and maybe half the summer, then you'll have an opportunity to build a business that is much more valuable and productive. If you have to be there, you've got a job. If you don't have to be there, then you've got a business. And yes, question.
Some people are a lot younger, like the different stages of a business.
Yeah.
Like those people in the back row there.
Oh yeah, they're.
Well, how can they take a week off? A month.
How can they take a week off a month?
Yeah.
Excellent question. Is that a reasonable question, Alyssa? Yeah. As you grow to a critical mass, you have staff that have key relationships with customers and suppliers that can do what you do. Right? So if you have to steer the ship from the front all the time, that's very tiring and eventually it's not sustainable. So they need to build a business with critical mass, and a really big part of it in terms of the plan. The most important plan is your marketing plan. Zlatan, would you agree?
I would.
So the marketing plan helps you attract customers, retain the existing customers, to formalize your referral system and things like that. Because often the person, the majority owner has the most onus on them because they have the most vested to find customers and retain customers. You can't be your own sales force. And you have this wonderful thing called the internet and websites and blogs and social media and all these things that Zlatan's an expert in to continually stay in front of customers and provide your value. Look at Assiniboia Gallery's website, awesome website, right? Like really, my Retina monitor really likes the detail in those images.
So you're not saying it's not just, it's for any stage you're at in your business to have what you're proposing?
Absolutely.
Nowadays.
Yes.
It used to be, if it's later on, you want to try to take more time off, right?
I think the younger generation has a significant advantage in that they want some life balance that Sherry was talking about, and they're not going to work crazy hours for some big company that may or may not go bankrupt, wipe out their pension, and punt them out the door whenever they want. Yeah. So, but the key behind that, it's a great question, is to think big, and don't grow your business by 5 or 10% a year. Figure out how, if your business is $5 million today, what does it need to look like to be 10 million? If it's 500,000 today, what does it need to look like to be $1 million or 2 million? And then work backwards from that goal. And then those are the things that I would suggest and allow on your to-do list, right? Don't let other people put stuff on your to-do list ever. Start with your goals, work backwards from your goals, and that's what your plan is. So in terms of plan, the highest plan is what's your strategy. I define strategy as the intentional focus and alignment of your resources to provide maximum customer value. Okay. So it's
Is that written down?
I'll email it. Absolutely. It's the intentional focus and alignment of your resources, so what you control, to provide maximum value, hopefully in different ways, to your customers, to your ideal customers. The marketing plan then talks about who is your ideal customer. Being all things to all people is not a strategy. It's the absence of a strategy common to startups who are hungry for cash, right? Being very focused on who an ideal customer is and aiming for them. When you're aiming for them, you will attract the others. If you're just aiming at everybody, you'll hit nothing and you'll attract all sorts of things that'll distract you from the key. So Sherry was talking about focus. Strategy is about focus and discipline. It's the parameters of what's in and what's out and the easy ability to say no. You can have 2 or 3 different types of ideal customers. You might have a smaller one that you're nurturing. You might have the majority who's in here, and then you might have these perfect ideal long term that they're harder to find and they come along once in a while, but they are the perfect customer. Don't treat everybody the same. Right? If you're on Amazon's website and you want to find something out through their electronic site, they're treating all their customers the same, whether you buy 5 books a week or 5 a year. The most important thing about planning is really thinking big. I've helped a small professional firm quadruple revenues very quickly once they focused on what their sweet spot was, and then how to price that according to the value they delivered. Now, some of you have to price by time. Hurts to say it. But ideally, you want to price by value to the customer. You may cost by time because you have people delivering things. But if you can ultimately price by time, even in an RFP world, then you'll make more money. And the more expertise you have, the higher the value that is and the more unique that is. I worked with another mid-market company. We increased their top-line revenues 371%. And the key in terms of planning was we think and act like a big company with a management team. So there's a plan and a direction that we want to go to. There's information or metrics, PL's favorite word, metrics, that we use to measure progress along the way. The most important information is operational. It's not financial. So if you have a firm with people, how busy were they that day and what percentage billable were they? Because the higher the billable are, the better. If you have people assembling or manufacturing, it's the same thing. The biggest cost in a manufacturing firm is unproductive time. Any questions? 11:45. We'll be done at noon, the latest. Okay.
Phil, can
Yes.
you speak a little bit to that concept of pricing by the volume to the customer?
Sure. The question was, may I speak to pricing based on value? So here's what I use as a value framework. And so we have personal and business, and we have financial and non-financial. So in the corporate world, even if you have a buyer or decision maker in a company and they're trying to improve their company's profits, your buyer that's making that decision probably has a bonus available to them if they do really well. If they do well and you help them succeed, they will probably get a promotion, and the company will probably be able to grow in terms of market share. The more successful it is, it can more easily attract and retain people, and so on. So I use this framework in the business world. In the personal world, there's all sorts of tangible and intangible things that people will benefit from. So I ask you, what's the benefit of a good haircut? Look good? And if you look good, then what happens? You feel good? And if you feel good, then what happens? Confidence? Excellent. And if you're confident, then what happens?
Think big.
Think big? And if you think big, then what happens? Successful.
Make money.
Make money. So I ask you, is this haircut worth $12 at Tragic Cuts? So there's always a huge emotional and personal value. And the key is to have some kind of framework or discussion points, and everybody's different. So you ask them. Mary sells art, wonderful art. Mary also has great skills at placing and knowing where it goes. I like to use up wall space, so I have my certificates in my office with just all jammed in there. But that's not what Mary would do. There would be one piece and nothing else, and it would look great. So there's always value to your customer, and we need to slow down and focus less on the sale and more on the value. And especially in the business-to-business world, there's all sorts of things going on. Everybody wants to play for a winning team, and everybody wants to know what the score is. So the more you can provide your team with the information as to where they're at, what's working well, what isn't working so well, and what the ultimate goals are, and let them figure out some of the hows. You don't need to steer all the hows. The most powerful thing you as owners and managers should be doing is asking your employees questions. What resources do you, well, number one, are you clear on the goals, right? What business are we in? Can you describe our strategy? Then, what are the company goals, and then what are your goals, and how do those fit? The stronger and more clearly you can align company goals with their personal task goals, the more productive and effective they'll be. Then, what resources do you need to be more effective? And so when you're looking at the information, operational is most important. And for a lot of companies, I recommend at least a weekly flash report that measures how many customers, how many transactions, how many hours, how many whatever, right? What's the volume turnover? And then in terms of, and that boils down to a daily. because you need to be able to measure what happened. How many policies did we write? How many calls did we make? Another really good metric is total days to cash. How much cash is sitting in receivables and not in our bank account? When you have, and your frontline people will tell you what matters there, and as managers you know what matters there, and the more we can connect the better. And then if management has these information, I've shown up at mid-market companies, $200 million companies. The first time the management team saw the company's financial statements was the day I showed up and gave them to everybody. It's pretty hard to be a manager of resources when you don't know what the resources are, what the score in the game is, or how the company's doing. And employees always make up their own minds, and it's always worse than it is. So now you've got somebody who's not excited or motivated because they made up their own mind because they don't have enough information. And stress comes from lack of information and a lack of control. So, are your managers stressed? And if so, who might be the cause of that? The key thing for your managers to be productive is they participate in the plan, and then you divide it down whether, and a quarter is a good minimum time frame for this is what we want to achieve in the next quarter, and then work backwards to what do we need to achieve to this week. And those are the goals that are on the to-do list and the specific action that are on the to-do list. Because then you're focusing on a week, a nice clean increment of time, and whether it has 4 days or 5 days, you can get something done within that week. Any questions on management? Okay. I assume the people that are my clients here know all those answers and don't actually have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
How do you take a busy company that's just dealing with their day-to-day customers, like what's right in front of their face,
Mm-hmm.
and their employees are really busy doing their job, they're doing a really good job.
Mm-hmm.
How do you if you take the example of the gallery, it's like I can see how it kind of floats in the world of, yes, we have some good staff, but at the same time, we're still very much the owner-manager.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, and I can see how you sort of take those couple steps where you feel like, okay, I am on top of things, but then is it you slide into your old habits, or, but I see that in other companies too that are bigger than us.
Yeah. So Mary's question, how do you take a busy company, and then how do you have the managers sort of move out of the day-to-day? So right now, how much time in your day would you spend, or in a week, in admin? What percent?
Not really very much.
Okay.
It's all, I'd say it's all customer driven.
Okay.
The time is-
So 80, 90 in customer
Yeah,
driven?
operations,
And how much do you spend on management?
depends. Like if there's a problem. A lot of
Problem
times.
solving.
If there's no problems, then not a lot of time.
Yeah.
But then the revenue comes from the customers. That's why the operations, right? Things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. So,
Seductive, right?
Yes.
Because you already want to spend your time with your customer, and that's where you spend your time, not attending to the other.
well, sure. And as the owner, and as the person with the most interest in that customer transaction, happy customer and success, it makes sense that you're dealing with it. However, there's your threshold, because that's you, right? Whereas if you can empower and train your people and develop systems and processes, and a process isn't a memorized linear list of things to do. A process is the way to think as to what are the customer standards we have, what decisions can I make, can I spend money. Ritz-Carlton, they can spend $2,500 to make any guest happy, right? So how much money can your employees spend to make your guests happy? And if there's nothing wrong with this model if you're happy with it and that's what you like to do. But there's a lot more leverage available if you have people who are empowered to do things and that can take action within parameters so that you don't have to be there all the time. So the ultimate answer is the more time you spend in management and developing processes and systems and training and mentoring, then the more the team can take on. And with some customers, you'll have a personal relationship, and with others, you say, you know what, this person's the expert in framing, and they'll help you the best. This is Joe. Talk to you later. Walk away. Run. So have the filters on for all the things that are incoming to you, and then say, who's the best person that can do this, or what system or process do we need so that I can delegate to somebody, right? And train and allow them to fail and learn and things like that. But for the really big customers, then yeah, you're it. But you have to free time. Can't have a jam day. You book, slack, booking, slack. You need a lot of slack in your day. Probably at least, well, I'd say a third, but a quarter at a minimum. Unscheduled stuff. So back to Clear Lake Lodge. We bought it in '79, we sold it in '96. The people that bought it from us still own it, but they got tired of the building. So they sold the building. Guess how much they sold the building for?
In '96?
No, it was last year.
Last year? Big bucks.
The answers tendered thus far bravely, thank you, were millions and big bucks.
How much is the square footage?
They sold the building for $1. They kept the land because that had a strategic location and value, and some guy came in and hauled it away and paid the $65,000 moving fees and parked it on a hill on a foundation and is going to turn it into a bed and breakfast, right? So there's not a lot of freedom if you end up selling your building for $1. So the most important thing for you as business owners is have some level of plan and goal on how you can maximize the value of your business and position yourself so you're doing the fun things in that business, and the information going to the managers who you can hold accountable for results so that you don't have to be there all the time. Thank you very much.